Welcome, Jay.
Hey Jay, how's it going?
How are you, mate? Shiv.
Good.
Hi, Jay. We're doing good.
Shiv will probably give it another 3 or so minutes to let people roll in.
Yep. I think we can start.
Perfect. All right, guys. Thank you again for your time. Unfortunately, we got the camera working, so you get to see me today, like our last session on Tuesday. I'm going to be very honest. Today is going to be a shorter session, so we probably won't need time for a break. A lot of the topics that will be covered in build sort of have already been touched upon in little bits here and there. And there's just less content to go through based on everything else we've talked about. So before I get started, Shiv, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I'm good. You can start.
Excellent. Cool. So as we talked about on Tuesday, the focus of today will be to focus more on the build aspect. How are developers or engineers, how are they going to be interacting with the platform, looking at objects such as an issue? Remember, when I say an issue, I want you to be thinking of like a Jira ticket. It's a developer item of work. How engineering managers can be using it to sort of track how people are working, and how we can sort of automate a lot of things throughout the process with integrations with, say, GitHub, for example. And before we get into actually what is an issue and the root of all of that, we're going to start within the settings page. And the reason I'm going to start within the settings page is one of the snap-ins that we have on our marketplace. And just to remind, we have our marketplace. Think of it like the App Store. It's an area where you can install applications, little plugins that we call snap-ins. And one of those snap-ins that is recently been developed is OLAs. So operational level agreements, metrics for issues. And in this partner training demo instance, I'm going to open it up and we can see a little bit of a description. And you can configure. This is a pop-up just confirming everyone can see the pop-up of the configurations. Shiv, can you see the configuration
Yep.
box? Okay, excellent,
Yes.
thank you. Okay, this is where we go through and we actually just set up. So when does this timer start? So like an SLA on a support ticket or an L1, L2, this is now an SLA for developers. I've set it up to start once it gets to triage or to do if we're looking at a Jira import. You can set it up however you like. When does it pause? I'm saying it's going to pause when it's in backlog, and actually I might say, let's pause the metric once it hits testing. And we're obviously going to stop the timer once it gets to the final stage. It's done. Maybe it's completed, won't fix, or it's a duplicate. We don't need to be tracking. Okay, go ahead and save. And we can close that and look under our service level agreements, our OLAs. We're similar to what we saw last Thursday. Demo OLA. We can go ahead and we can just set a policy. In this case, the policy is a lot more basic. We don't add a metric, it's just a resolution. We've set up everything else within the snap-in itself. I can choose calendar hours or organization hours, set up breach time. So maybe it's a 24-hour and a warning time after when there's 20 minutes left. That would not be a very great one for a developer. They might not be too happy. And then any filtering, only set it for a priority of P0, or if I want to do a customer, or if I want to add it on a subtype, applying those filters so that we can set this operational level agreement based on what we want to set it on. Now, the reason this is nice and it's great is it's going to help then support teams to make sure that work is getting done on time and developers aren't getting left behind. We can track the SLAs on, well, the OLAs, and then start to set up notifications. This one is getting close to a breach. We should alert a manager. We should escalate this. All right. So let's use these level agreements to then go forward and help. And that then feeds into, well, when we're looking at issues, if developers are operating from DevRev, then what do they look like? We can already see that an issue up here, we've had a few subtypes created. And I didn't go ahead and create them. What actually happened was when I set up the Jira connection, I believe it was last Thursday, and I did an import, it's gone ahead and it's created some subtypes for the different subtypes of Jira tickets: story, task, bug, subtask. And any of those custom fields that might be Jira specific have been added, as well as any of the standard issue fields. And when we are looking at those stock fields on an issue, we've tried to create it as full as we could. Obviously, every company, every customer will have a slightly different approach, but these are the fields we saw as fairly important for stock fields. And you'll notice they're not all just text. We have a customers, which is an account, so we can start to associate an account to a customer, an account to a developer item of work, which we'll see why that's important later. But these are just some of the other stock fields. Okay, estimated effort, which is a double. How long does a developer think this will take to work? And then that will come important when the discussion of planning comes into it. Sprint planning, which I know, Greg, I think I saw you have joined. You wanted to talk about was sprint planning. Developed with parts, estimated effort again, in a different way. This is more of a category. Types, so a lot of different fields are already here by default. But that doesn't mean we can't go ahead and create new fields. Custom fields, I went through this when we looked at tickets and the other objects, but you can go through, create custom fields to suit. If you are, or people, prospects you're speaking to prefer the concept of Jira and the story points, by all means, that is doable. So yeah, completely customizable like everything else we've seen. And I'm going to now jump into Maple, this demo org, so we can look at what might this environment look like for a developer. And if I open my work, you can see I've actually modified this from what we last saw. So last Tuesday, last Thursday, this was much different, but now this is how I would imagine it if I was a developer. First of all, I'm going to be interested in issues and a vista of issues. Okay. Now this is a little different to some other platforms. And the reason being, as you saw, we can start to look for customers. And I can start to see, well, this issue is affecting these customers. And the reason this is important is developers, and I guess I would say I associate in this mentality varies with them. And it's not necessarily a great thing, as my mother has once told me, is I don't like to do things unless I know why I'm doing it. And developers sometimes are no different. They're happy to do the work, but they want to know the impact. Why are they working on what they're working on? And for that reason, we've tried to make it as easy as possible. Well, this issue is affecting these customers and these customers for this issue. And now what that means I can do is I can start to sort by a customer impact. Okay, well, we can now see with all the issues that are open or in progress, we're starting to filter by customer impact based on how many customers, how many tickets it's going to impact. We can scroll down. And the way this is getting incorporated is we have an issue, that developer item that is linked to a ticket, that L2 escalation of support. And because that L2 support ticket is connected with an account, we can start to link this up. Well, this developer is working on this issue, which is going to affect these customers. And that really helps. And it really makes developers understand why they are working on it. So first and foremost, that's how we start to look at vistas. We can go through and you can filter like we've seen in all the other vistas. You can group it by stage. And for that, we've also gone ahead and just like we saw with product and support, what we thought like, well, what are some of the main vistas that might be important? We're going to be looking at one, now, next, later. What are we working on now? And that is across these stages here. What is next to be looked at? So what are the issues, the developer items of work that are prioritized? And what is later? What is everything that is sitting in backlog currently? So this isn't by all means a full encompassing list. We're obviously not seeing tickets in the issues in the triage state, but that also makes sense. We don't need to be looking at them if they're not in backlog, if they're not prioritized, and if they're not open, like in progress. Okay. If I want to start to look at now, one of the other things, and this is across all vistas, within the issues and the developer realm is Gantt view. So we can see here, we can start to look at it in terms of a timeline. If I hover over, I obviously know why it's not showing, because in this demo org, we haven't done any of those durations. But if I go into DevRev and I go to issues, not trails, and then I start to look at a Gantt view. Well, that's not the best example, but we can start to see what does it look like in terms of a timeline when we have durations. Well, this issue will finish here, and then this issue. In fact, if I just go and open one and I add some information, the target start date can be today. And the target close date can be this week. Cool. We can start to see what that looks like. Now, if we need to move that around, we can. Okay, so trying to make it as friendly and user-friendly as possible. We can move dates down the bottom. We can look at weeks instead of days. We can look at months, and we can look at years. And so we can start to look at it very holistically in a very big view as well. Now, from there, it's like, well, what other views might be important? And one of those other views that we felt was important, and I actually have it under people, because in my opinion, it is issues that are addressing tickets. So what developer items of work do we have that are linked to a support ticket? And not only that, we're grouping them by owner, and we also have them in the now, next, later categories. So very quickly, I know that Arturo is working on 3 issues that are related to tickets. And I can open that issue. If I scroll down, I can see it's assigned to some tickets here. Now, if I open the tickets, I can start to go back. And this is how a developer is going to be working with issues. It is how they're going to be working with the vistas. I can come in and I can now read internal discussions. And if I want, just like we saw, I can get a quick summary. But I can also go to a customer messages level. Well, what is the customer saying? What conversations have been happening there? Permissions are obviously the MFZ permissions. We can set that up so that as a developer on a developer license, I can't go and just send a message to a customer, but I probably should be able to engage in those internal discussions if I want. But what's really powerful here is with this linking and going back to the detail of the ticket, I can start to scroll down and I can see the account, I can see who it was reported by, but more so I can see what other issues are linked to it and sessions. Well, remember when we looked at sessions from a support agent's point of view, but also from a product point of view, it's impactful across the whole company. I can now look at a session and go, pull up the developer tools. I know what were the API calls, what were the responses. I can look at the console logs. So that replication, once it gets to me, I understand. It makes my job easier to diagnose and debug. Now, closing that, another important or interesting thing here is discussions, as you would expect, to be able to have those conversations at a developer level. And unlike, say, a Jira, it's not just going to always be chronological. You can respond in a Slack threaded way. Keep that context. But more so than that, I can start to look at events. And I can understand what is happening. And if I scroll all the way up, I can see that we've actually pulled in some information from GitHub. Arturo created this branch. And actually, he created this branch, and that prompted the system, DevRev, to create the issue. So he didn't create this issue. He just worked in GitHub. Arturo pushed a commit. He opened a PR. Okay. Going down, we can see it got move to a sprint as well. But all of these events are tracked because we want to make lives easier. Developers are great at coding. They're great problem solvers. But if we're being honest, sometimes when they're working on so many different tasks, the concept of updating a source of record, the stages, isn't the top of the mind. And so let's use these updates from GitHub, which can actually update stages. You see here that there was an automation. It updated the stage because it had a PR opened. Let's take those events from GitHub or even Bitbucket. Let's track them. Let's use them to automate those stage changes. And as we talked about with support agents, I now open an issue and I look at the events and I just am up to date. Sorry. Sorry. Oh, there it is. Greg, I'm glad you agree. Yeah, let's be real. Bookkeeping isn't always the most fun. And it's very easy to have oversights there. I'm going to take a pause. Do we have any questions in regards to what we've seen on what an issue is, what an operational level agreement is, how we can operate, how developers can operate, how managers can operate when looking at these vistas? Oh, wait, Greg. Okay, so Greg, I'm just reading a question. For non-tech users at their workstations, how does this solution provide the ability to guide users to perform the right actions? Can it provide examples, visual examples? So if I'm understanding correctly with your example, Greg, it's about deduplication. And ideally using DevRev, you won't get that duplication because the AI is already going to be surfacing developer items of work. All right. Now, yes, there will be times that duplication might happen even though that information is surfaced. And that is something that ideally people will get more used to and it will be lessened. Now, the flip side to that is if there's other workflows you want, and again, if I'm understanding the question incorrectly, Greg, please correct me. But we also have the workflow builder, which has AI nodes, in which case, at the moment, you would be setting up these workflows with an AI node to do some of these processes. Is that what you were thinking, Greg? Could have sprints. Vish, yes, like in terms of fields, remember the platform is very customizable. If you want certain fields, such as project, and you want to use projects and project names, you can then filter and group by that. if you're using enhancements, you might not need to use a project name. It might just come and fall under an enhancement. But if you want to use enhancements with sub-projects, by all means, that can be done. And then you can filter on based on projects as well. Excellent. Well, I believe Shiv is also going ahead and answering these questions. So if everyone's okay with it, I'll continue on and we'll start to look at sprint boards and how we think of sprint boards. Greg, looking for interactive. Yeah, so you're thinking of AI then as a co-pilot in that regard, Greg. I'm not sure if you're still typing, Greg, but I'm going to start answering. So yeah, like if we're looking at creating an issue, a developer item, then we are using AI as a co-pilot to surface tickets, items that already exist. And in that way, we are guiding users to learn which issues to assign to and not create duplicate work. In terms of more guidance, then yes, by all means, more automations can be created. It's not something we have in the product to show you today, but by all means, it can be done with workflows and snap-ins. Cool, you want to move from triage to in development. Maybe there's some information that needs to be filled in first, and we can have those dependencies, conditional statements set to move from this stage to this stage. We need these fields filled in. Okay, so then guiding, and after a few rounds of that, users won't need that guidance ideally. They'll just remember what they need to fill in. So as we jump back into the platform, we can start to look at sprint boards and planning. And if I go to work, we will see that I have sprint boards here. And this is an area that you can view sprints. You can look at active versus planned. And you'll see different names. And I'm going to jump into DevRev just to give you an example what it looks like in an environment where we are using it. Here are some sprints. We can see what the impacted parts are, how many issues are pending. If we're looking at active, if we're looking at planned, same. But we can also start to filter on parts. So maybe I only want to look at support app. Cool. And we can see here that now we're only looking at planned sprints for the support app. Now, but what does it look like to actually go ahead and create a sprint? I can create a sprint, give it a name, give it a description. You can set the duration. Maybe you want to work on a 2-week. Maybe you want to work on a 3-week. That's fine. Start date can be today. You can start to define a backlog. And that is through different attributes. So I could say, look, all issues assigned to J, but they can start in this sprint in the backlog. Or if I want to get rid of J, I undo it. And I can say any in the rewards can go into the backlog. And any of those other fields that you want, you can be doing it, setting it up as a team. I'm going to pin it to my work. So when I create it, I can just go to it very quickly and I can press create. Now here we see sprint 1, it starts today, sprint 2, and then backlog. And because I set up that backlog, it's already pulled in all of those issues So they're here. And now I can look at it and I can see that these are prioritized. So I might even just move them. Let me move my Zoom controls first. And I'm going to move that to sprint 2. And we can see that the sprint board is here. And if I have access to other sprint boards, I could also move them to a different sprint board if I need. And that is to say that these sprint boards are permission based. You don't need team A looking at team B's sprint board necessarily. I'm going to quickly move them to sprint 2. So we can see here in the next sprint, we will be working on these. I see that this is still backlog, but these two are in development. So I'm actually just going to quickly move them, sprint 1. And obviously you could also go from the issues list that we looked at the start and create sprints off of that. In the same way, I can create an issue and add that to this sprint. Or as I just said, add sprints to this from one of those other lists. You'll notice by default, we are sorting by customer impact. But if I click on settings, I can go ahead and I can start to change this. I can start to say, I want to group it by owners. And I want to sort it by maybe priority. And now every time I open this sprint board, it's going to be showing me in this specific view. You can see it's now changed. If this is a sprint that's been running for a lot of time, we'd be able to see previous sprints. But obviously I just created this, so we're not going to be able to see it. However, one of the things like when we're looking at sprints is insights, and there is one differentiator that we really do pride ourselves on. I'm going to show you insights here, and then I'll go to a real life example so we can see it with some information. But this is how we sort of structure our insights. And these top two, I'm going to focus on first. Total enhancement issue count, total maintenance. What does this mean? It means like with our developers, how much work are we doing because it is for an enhancement, something to improve our platform? And of those issues, how many were initiated by customers and how many were just internal requests? In an ideal world, this number for customer initiated will be bigger than an internal request because we want to be improving our platform based on the voice of the customer. And on the flip side, we have total maintenance. How much work is being done to maintain our platform, to keep it operational, to make sure it's operating without bugs. And in the same way, we're going to split it up. How many have, because of customer reported tickets, how many are just because we noticed? And if I talk about an ideal world again, this number will be the opposite of an over here. This number will be smaller than an internal because we want to be identifying the issues before a customer picks it up. We don't want our customers to be hitting these bugs, to be hitting these issues and reporting them to us. Better customer experience. And what does that look like from a developer in a real life view? So as you can see, I actually cannot access all of these sprint boards. This one I can, but this one I can't. If I click on it, I just get no, not allowed. And I'm actually going to filter by part. I'm going to go to the build app because I know there's one there. And here, apparently I don't have access to that one anymore. If I go down, I'm going to find here, build team sprint board, and I can open it. We can see now that we're up to sprint 41, which is going to end on the 24th. So in 10 days, sprint 42, and we have our backlog. And if I open insights, this is what we're starting to look at. Now, in this case, unfortunately, internal requests are the main reason for our enhancements. So we have noticed stuff. So in a future, we would prefer this to be the opposite. But when we look at maintenance, we're actually doing more work because we've identified it ahead of customers. So that's great to see. We have a sprint burnout chart and, you know, hovering over, you get the most important metrics. A lot of this is fairly standard. When we're looking at issues, we can break it down based on stage. We can break it down based on owner. We can break it down based on priority and part. We can start to look at the health how many issues are remaining. So we're 79% of our 14 days remaining. And we still have 15 issues. You can start to look at the average time it's spending in each. So prioritize the spending the most time. And as a manager now, if I'm putting my manager hat on, I might start to look at this and I'm like, okay, Ayush, cool. Well, he's got a lot of work. He's got 11. And I can open it and I can start to get some details about Ayush. Cool. And apparently the daily logout has just happened. Let me just sign back in. But what we're going to be able to do right now is we can see what Ayush is working on. But I want to be one more step ahead. Where did my screen share go? Apologies, let me just bring up my screen. I see, Greg, you've asked a question. Apologies for this. I just signed out of my whole computer. Well, Chrome. There we go. So we're just having a look at Ayush and we can see what he's working on. Now, in a similar fashion to last week, well, it's a Tuesday actually, I can pull up our little bar down the bottom and I can say, what has at Ayush and we can start to query naturally, natural language. What has Ayush worked on? Maybe we find that in the sprint, issues aren't getting completed and that's resulting in the burnout. We're not getting stuff solved. Okay. And why is that important? Well, we don't want Ayush to be overloaded. And in that way, sorry, 1 second. Let me bring that back up. Bring that back up. In that way, we can start to track, well, Ayush hasn't been able to get the work done for this sprint. And the reason is he's been working on all of this. He's actually had his attention focused elsewhere. We can start to roll it up. So this is a bit different. And now we can start to think of it at a trails level, like that knowledge graph. Ayush has focused 45% of his time on product one across these these contributions, but he's had 0.97% contribution on the total part. Okay, well, what has he been doing? Why is that? Let's drill down. See, he's been working on capability 72, which is the support app, instead of capability 57, which is the build app. And maybe that's why Ayush isn't actually getting stuff done. Cool. And just like we saw the other day, we can see how many issues he's worked on, how many tickets he's worked on, and what customers that's impacted. Greg, let me see. Can you give me a bit of an example, Greg, in terms of breaking it down into parts? My understanding is what stage of the issue. I'm guessing you're typing, Greg, while I wait for that to pop up. Ah, there we go. So, yes, Greg, the answer is yes. Is it something I could show you today? No, because that's not how we've set up our environments. But if different stages are owned by different people in different departments, by all means, you can start to report on that and understand what is the life cycle. So when I look at insights here, well, one, I could just filter by an owner. Maybe I want to look at Ayush. And now we can start to see the metrics related with him. Okay. If by any chance the different stages are owned by different people, then we are doing that calculation. And that can be tracked in other dashboards as well that you could create, we can create. It's really going to depend on how that environment is set up. Cool. And I see Shiv is answering your top question, Greg, so I'm going to let him get to you on that. To the whole audience, quick stop. What questions might we have in regards to the sprints, the sprint insights? Okay, I'll take silence as everyone's feeling pretty comfortable with what they've seen so far. If by chance you do have a question, just type it up and we will answer that as soon as possible. The final thing that I sort of want to show you today does come down to metrics. And specifically Developer 360, which is a dashboard we're working on. It is, to be candid, in beta mode. I'm pulling it up, and what we can see here is, this is just for the last 30 days, but number of dev users who took surveys, so satisfaction surveys, and we're looking, how are they feeling? Start to look at performance. So incidents. How many incidents did we have? How many SLA breaches did we have? And just like other dashboards we've seen, these you can really drill down and click on. What is how do we feel about the current testing pipelines? How about activity? Or in the last 30 days, what is the activity we've seen? How many code contributions have we had? What is that split between the coders versus non-coders versus non-linked coders? And if we look at this graph, it does show health. On the weekends, there's not really much about interaction, or not during the week, it picks up. That's good. We don't want to be having our engineers working too much over the weekends. What is the 7-day running average? How are we tracking? And anytime these you can drill down into, you can open them and we can see what are the code contribution or what issues and by who. Really useful for understanding how the team is operating. When we're looking at categorization of closed issues, is it new work? Is it a bug? Is it a tech debt? Is it new work? And then we can start to look at it over the last 30 days in a graph. We start to look at it in the enhancement pipeline based on parts. So how many issues do we have that are still open, that are active, that are stalled, that are closed? And the same when we just look at issues. So very quickly, we can get a good holistic understanding of what is happening. Where is the health of our developers? Are issues getting looked at with the amount they should be getting looked at? How does that relate to tickets? From the tickets that are linked to issues? How many are still open, active, stalled, closed? We're looking at subtypes of tickets being bugs. Okay, so all of this is here and everything is drill downable. We're looking at the bugs, how many bugs were opened versus closed. Who was the owner? What is the ticket? Active and stalled. And finally, down the bottom, we start to look at deployment frequencies. And then surveys. Surveys about users. How does that relate when we're looking at communication? And how does that relate to efficiency? What is an average cycle? How much time to open? How much time to approve and how much time to merge? What's the lead time for those deployed PRs? How many focused versus unfocused users do we have? And, what's the predictability across enhancements and issues? We're never sure, we can hover it over. What is the sprint board status? Okay, so a lot of these metrics are just metrics that we want to track. Now, obviously there's no data here because I probably haven't done any surveys, but I don't work as a developer. But if I was, then I would be able to see information here with data. And that is really like, when we think of a dashboard to be all encompassing as best as we could, this is how we thought of it when it came to developers. And with that, I'm going to stop. I'm going to open the floor up to questions about what you may have seen today. Thank you, Greg. I'm glad you liked that feature.
Any more questions from the audience?
Vish, I like the way your mind is going at the moment. Turing is not suggesting items for sprints, to the best of my knowledge. But is it possible to be doing? Yes, because we can say, well, this issue is related to this issue. Okay, so to the best of my knowledge, not in the platform today, but could be done. Yeah, Vish, actually, great question. Let me show that. So when we look at, in terms of history, I want to go here. When we look at events, we can actually see when it was moved to sprints. Okay, so this issue on November last year was put into this sprint. And then in March, it was moved to this sprint. And then today I updated it to this sprint. So we are tracking those events and any changes to fields is tracked. So you can see that.
All right, I think I don't see any more questions coming in. Can we add custom field validations to fields?
If by custom field validations, you mean conditional field setting, Vish? or someone needs to validate a field change, yes, that can be set up. It would be a custom bit of work. Someone tries to modify this field, it will create a note in the discussion section in which person Y needs to come in and say, yes, I approve of this, and then that will update the field. Definitely doable.
Okay.
I believe that might be it, Shiv.
Yep, that's it. Thanks a lot, Jay. As a next step, I'm gonna share all the recordings along with the materials and the topics that we covered in the past 1 week.
Mhm.
And let's see if there are any more questions. We'd like to address it personally. And we'll also set up how to sell, how to pitch the use cases, specific use cases, depending on the customer industry. And we'll also help you with some materials. Also, we are developing a training program for sales engineers from the partnership side, so that they can go ahead and demo. Do custom demos to end customers as well in the coming weeks.
Shiv, I just saw a question come in from Greg, and thank you, Greg.
Yeah.
You have reminded me. So DevRevU, if you go to Google, Rev University, did I spell that right? DevRev University, let me find it.
Uppercase U.
Yes, there should be from the website as well. Can't see, I've got too many Zoom controls. Let me find it quickly. Let me quickly find that for you. I thought I had it bookmarked. There. Cool. Okay, so here we can start to see DevRev University. Shiv, we might need to confirm with the team how we get these out to people.
Yep, I'll do that.
Excellent. Vish, can we get a sandbox with pre-populated data? So by default, when you get a sandbox environment, we'll have some tickets and some issues in there. If you want it built out more comprehensively, that is something different that we will have to look at, and not to offload, but I think that's something that Shiv will be looking at organizing with you.
Yep. Yes, Vishwadit, I have a script that I can, populate any company's dummy data by scraping the website. So we'll do that as a next step when we get in touch. All right. So obviously every partner should have their own account and some dummy data populated, right? Yeah. Perfect. Thanks a lot, Jay. I hope this session was insightful and helpful. Yeah. So we can close this webinar. Yep. It was wonderful. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for your time.